All right, today we're going to make a new seat for the transom of our Cobalt 292. We're going to start with some HPTE board, and I bought some that's oversized so we can cut it down to the correct size. And I got it at a thicker size so that we don't have any flexing in the middle. If anything heavy ends up on it, or a couple of folks sit on it at the same time, I'll put the link in the description for where I got this. It was a very good deal, and I didn't find it cheaper anywhere else, but go and do your shopping, make sure you get a good deal on it. This is basically the same material as a cutting board. So you can keep the scraps for cutting board material, or you can keep it for additional projects on your boat. A lot of people also use the same material to make hatch covers for their boats, or covers for or doors or anything like that that need to be replaced. So great material to have on hand if you have a boat and you keep it long term for repairs, or just making new bases for your existing seats or new seats. So we need to measure a piece that is 20 inches by 37. So it's going to be 20 this way, 37 that way, and then get that cut, and then cut our foam to the right size, and then sew our material and all of the backing and everything, and then get it all assembled. So we're going to start by measuring it out and getting our cut lines drawn, and then cut the material. All right, we've got our lines drawn. We've got 37 inches this way, 20 inches this way. We confirmed with our straight edge and our 90-degree corner here that everything lines up. Next thing we're going to do is cut. You can cut the HPTE board, some people call it starboard. You can cut it with anything that you use to cut your regular wood with. Table saw, circular hand saw, anything along those lines you can cut it with. You want to cut slowly, but with a little bit of pressure. You don't want to go too slow because you're going to end up melting it instead of cutting it, but you don't want to push through too fast because you may crack it. So just gentle pressure, make sure you're still cutting and not melting, and move forward. Make sure you're cutting a straight line, and that way you've got a nice clean edge and you don't have to go back and clean it up too much. So let's go ahead and get it cut, and then we'll continue working. All right, we're going to use a battery-powered Ryobi circular saw. I've got a small blade on there, plenty to get through this. And we were set up outside so I don't get all this mess inside the house, and we're going to start cutting. All right, that one's cut. Let's go on to the next side. right, that side is cut as well. We've got two good clean cuts that are very nice and even. And now we're gonna get to the foam. All right, now I'm getting my foam ready. Underneath, you can see my HPDE starboard that is cut. And on top, you'll see two blocks of foam. I've adhered these two together. What you wanna use, I didn't have a piece of foam big enough. I had these from old projects on our last boat. This is 4-inch thick, high density outdoor foam. That's what you want to use. You want to use outdoor foam. You don't want to use indoor foam. It'll get moldy. But that's what this is. And what I use to get foam to stick together permanently, or any sort of fabric to foam, but mainly this is for getting foam to stick together permanently, is the National Guard's 1633 foam lock. I'll put a link in the description for this. If you do any sort of upholstery work, whether it's for patio furniture, your boat, interior furniture, or just want to have something around to stick foam together for some reason, this stuff is the best. I haven't found anything better. Again, I'll put a link to this in the description as well. So I got them put together. I'm going to give it maybe an hour or so for that to cure, for that bond to become permanent. And then I'm going to flip this entire thing over and measure where I need to cut my foam. And then we'll cut the foam from there and move on to the next steps. All right, so now that we've got the two sections of foams adhered together, what I've done is flipped the foam and the board upside down, have the board on top of the foam, and I went ahead and got it pretty close to this edge, left about 3/4 of an inch. Same with this edge, and what I'm going to do is trace it out with a permanent marker, and then go back with my ruler and mark where I'm going to have to cut. All right, as you can see, I've got my line drawn all the way around on all four sides of the starboard. And we're going to go ahead and remove this, then measure and draw our line with our ruler for where we're going to cut, so that it's the same dimensions all around. We're going to have a little bit of extra foam sticking out on all four sides, past where the board would be. And then we're going to come back and cut it. So I use a upholstery ruler, and it's see-through. Makes it really easy to make quick measurements and draw lines where you need. And what I'm going to do, as you can see, the blue line is at about a 1/2 inch from the edge there. So I'm going to follow that 1/2 inch line across and make sure we've got our ruler lined up on the 1/2 inch line. And then once we do that, I'm going to draw my cut line on the outside here. I changed my mind. I'm going to do a 1/4 inch. 1/2 inch is, I think, too much material sticking out past the board. So moved it up to the 1/4 inch line and drew my line on this side. And I'm going to do the same on the other three sides. All right, as you can see, I've got my line for where the board was and my cut line, which is a 1/4 inch outside of that, all the way around. And now we're going to be able to make our cut where we need, and then get to fitting it onto the board as the next step. If you're thinking about doing your own upholstery work and you start out cutting foam like a mess, like I did here on an old project, you learn pretty quickly that that is just terrible, and the outcome is very poor, no matter how careful you're trying to be. I learned a trick from another friend who's an upholsterer, and it's to use a electric kitchen knife, similar to this. It's a cheap one. I'll put the link to it on Amazon in the description below, so you can get the same one if you want. Before I cut my lines, let me show you how straight this cuts in comparison to this mess from a couple years ago. So all you do is push the button, and when you push the button, the two blades oscillate against each other. I don't know if you can see it there. There's two blades right there, and they go back and forth in opposite directions, and it makes a nice clean cut. Now check this out. Do you see how clean that cut is? That is something that you absolutely cannot get by hand, and it doesn't get any cheaper than this simple tool for cutting upholstery foam and getting a good clean cut. So now we're going to go ahead and do this all across our pattern on all four sides and cut as close as we can to the line. Doesn't have to be exactly perfect, but try to get as close as you can and make your cuts as straight as you can. So we've got our piece cut on all four sides. Very smooth, nice, even cuts. And as you can see, we've got the 1/4 inch gap all around on all four sides, just like we measured. So now that we've got this all set, we're going to move on to our fabric. First, we're going to make our piping. You don't have to use piping, but I prefer to, and I prefer to make my own. And I'm using outdoor piping. I'll put the link in the description. It's not fabric or synthetic rope. It's actually more like a plastic material. I think it's vinyl or something. And the material width is going to be 1.5 inches. You can go 1 3/4 if you want a little bit more room for error or a wider piece to stitch onto. I use 1.5 inch for this size piping. I'll put a link to the materials as well as the piping I use in the description below. And the thread is very important as well. You want to use marine grade UV resistant thread, or else the thread will become brittle and start breaking way sooner than the vinyl itself will get old and brittle. So let me show you how I make the piping here on the sewing machine, and then we'll get to the next step. Next is going to be the top piece of the vinyl. I've got it cut to the exact size of the foam. If you remember, the foam is 1/4 inch bigger than the actual base plate on all sides. I went ahead and very slightly rounded all the corners as well. And now we're going to sew the piping to the faceplate. So now we're going to be sewing the piping onto the faceplate. You want the vinyl side up, and you want to lay your piping in this orientation. Line up the edges here, and sew right along the same stitch line, and that'll get you a nice, clean, smooth edge that's also even with where you cut. And then we'll go all the way around the entire faceplate and meet the piping back here, and then after that we'll sew the edges on. Here's another tip if you've never sewn piping before, or just corners on the vinyl material if you're having corners meet. If you're coming around the corner, normally if you try to bend this, it'll get all bunched up like that. So what you want to do is make a bunch of slits in the material, and then once you do that, it'll lay down nice and flat, and you can sew right around that corner and it'll look great. Now we've got our piping completely sewn to our faceplate. You can see all the corners have the little slits in them so that they sit nice and flush. And it's just a little bit wrinkled, that's why you see that edge. I went ahead and rounded off all four corners of our board that's going to act as the base. We've got our foam here that's going to sit on top of it, and we've got our vinyl with the sew foam on the back with the score pattern that we wanted. And we're going to take this, stretch it over the foam and the base, and get it all straightened out, and then start stapling. All right, so I've got the cover on there, and then I flipped it upside down, and I stretched all the sides and the corners up to get them up to where it needs to be. You can see it's just about even with our lip here, and what we're going to do is pull and then stretch over. And before I start doing any of that, I went ahead and got my air stapler, and I set the pressure. Pressure on these is going to be typically between 50 to 100 psi. Before you start stapling anything, you want to do a bunch of samples. You can see I did a handful of them around here, and set your pressure higher or lower. The higher the pressure, the deeper the stapler is going to get plowed in. The lower the pressure, the less pressure there'll be on the staple. It's going to differ based on your material, the composition of it, what manufacturer it's from, and everything else. So every single time, and it's also going to change based on humidity and everything else. So every single time you want to use an air stapler, make sure to set your pressure first before you start working with any of your vinyl. So now what I'm going to do is start, I'm going to take, so we got the short sides here and here, and the long sides there and there. What I'm going to do is start with the short sides, just because there's less room for error. I know exactly where my corners are, and I'm going to take and pull up probably about 25, or what is this, 1/3 of the way through this side, and then this section here. So I've got two parts where I'm stapling a few just to hold things in place. Then I'll do the center and stretch that over, and I'm not going to do the corners yet at that point. Do the corners last. Then I'm going to do the other side the same, and then I'll come over to the long sides, and then very last steps we'll go through the corners. Now that we've got the vinyl cover stapled on and in place and stretched over, what I'm going to do is use this material that's, I forget what it's called. I'll put a link down in the description for all this stuff. But essentially, it's a piece of vinyl that is wrapped over itself like that. And in the middle of it, you can separate it to tack staples in there so that you don't see the staples. And the end result, you see all the staples here, and then the end result is like this. It hides all of the staples, and that's good for looks. And then also, if you ever have to remove the seat, you don't want to reach under the seat and accidentally snag your finger or your skin on the staples themselves. And all these in the middle that I just stapled in to set my pressure and everything, we're going to pull those out after we're all done. So we're going to go ahead and staple this trim piece all the way around, get it all cleaned up, and then show you the end result. So we've got the underside completely finished. We've got all of the trim stapled on. I used a pick and a pair of pliers to get all the rest of the staples out that I had placed in the middle when I was setting the air pressure. Let's flip it over and see what it looks like. All right, there's our final product. Keep in mind the vinyl is going to stretch a little bit once it's out in the sun and get some heat, and it'll be a little bit of a tighter fit. This is going to be the back side that sits flush against the what I think will probably end up being another cushion that's a backrest, and then that is the front side, and that's what it's going to look like. All right, so here's our seat. Aiden's going to demonstrate for us. Hi, Aiden. All right, so sit on the chair real quickly. All right, let's do it one more time. Now keep your eye. You see how the air kind of comes up in the cushion? So what we're gonna do is drill a few vent holes on the bottom that's gonna allow moisture to drain out, and also, more importantly, every time you sit on the seat, you won't have the entire thing fluffing up while the air slowly goes out of the stitches. So let's flip it over. All right. And we got our drill ready, Aiden? Mm-hmm. Yes, sir? Yeah. All right. So I'm going to say, let's see, this is a pretty big cushion. How many holes should we put in there, Aiden?
3.
What do you think?
3.
3? Let's do maybe 1, 2, 3, 4. And then 1 in the middle, 5 of them, since that's a pretty small drill bit. It's a 3/8 inch drill bit. So, is that good? Mm-hmm. What do you think?
Yeah.
All right, let's get to it. You could randomly drill, but we're gonna mark our spots so that they're evenly spaced all over. So we're gonna do 1, 2, 3, 4, and then 1 in the middle. All right, we've got that one marked, that one in the middle, that one, and that one. You ready, Aiden? Mm-hmm. All right, let's go. Next hole. All right, last hole, Aiden. You got it?
Yep.
Good job, Aiden. All right, Aiden, we're gonna give it another test.
Mm-hmm.
Got all your holes drilled.
Yeah.
You got 2 over there, 1 in the middle, 2 over here. They're not very big holes, so we'll see if it has enough ventilation or not. Let's give it a shot. Let's give it a shot. What do you think? It's a lot better than before.
Yeah.
Cool, man. Good job, dude. High five.